Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on when you're viewing this. My name is John Mark Keyes, and I am very glad to be able to provide my reflections on this Sunday's readings today. This is a significant Sunday liturgy for us here at St. Joe's. 3 months after the church doors were closed, they have reopened to allow us to gather in person. Of course, not all of us can be here in person, which is why I'm speaking to you now in this video recording. Although our gathering in the church is not quite the same as it was, those of us who are here can see and hear each other once more. This is progress. It has been a long 3 months, not only in terms of our life as a worshiping community, but in so many other ways as well. The pandemic has taken its toll, most devastatingly on those who have contracted COVID-19 and those who have lost their lives to it. This has been particularly felt in long-term care homes, where the resulting lockdown has cut off residents from contact with their families and their friends. The pandemic has also taken its toll more broadly in terms of the social interaction that nourishes all of us. There's one word that encapsulates what we've been going through these past 3 months: distance. The phrase social distance has entered our vocabulary, but there are many other forms of distance as well. The distance that separates many of us from those who have died. The distance that separates many of us from the family and friends we would otherwise talk to, see, and hug, and who in many cases need our support. The distance that separates many of us from our schools and our workplaces and diminishes the personal interactions that make them flourish. The distance that separates us from things we need because the money to pay for them is no longer coming in. These are just a few of the distances that have changed our lives and will likely to continue to do so for some time. The challenges of distancing are hardly new, particularly in our spiritual life. Distance is a fundamental aspect of our relationship with God. We do not see or hear God in the way we do those we live with. God has often been portrayed as a remote being somewhere up above us in the heavens. The incarnation of Jesus was a one-time event that took place long before any of us was born. We have never met him in person, or heard his voice, or felt his embrace. We know him through the scriptures, the readings we hear at each Mass. This distance is not just physical, it is also temporal, spanning about 2,000 years. Distancing is also at the center of the gospel readings throughout the Easter season. Jesus' death, his absences after the resurrection, and his eventual ascension are episodes of distancing that the disciples found quite distressing. But it is distancing alleviated by the resurrection, by Jesus' appearances afterward, and by the Pentecost, the coming of the Holy Spirit. The distancing of Jesus' physical presence is overcome by God's spiritual presence, which, though unseen and unheard, is every bit as powerful. And perhaps that's the secret to dealing with distancing, by concentrating on the ways in which those who seem far away are still present to us. I was struck by the cube that Father Jim showed us during the video homily last week, the one his mother had given to him. I too have mementos of my mother littering my desk, things I can't help but see each day. Her death separated us, but she is present in my mind and in my heart. In today's first reading, Jeremiah speaks of God who sees the heart and the mind. Jeremiah feels God's presence and speaks of his faith that God will protect him from his persecutors. And in the gospel, Jesus speaks of a watchful God, paying attention not only to sparrows, but to each and every one of us, to the point of knowing how many hairs are on our heads, which must be a bit trickier these days, given how long everyone's hair has been getting. I've been fortunate that I was able to see the barber on Monday of this week, and I've spared you the crazy hair that had sprouted over the past 3 months. And in our lone lives, although many of us are separated, some of us are together more than ever. I'm spending much more time with my spouse, Nancy. If you had asked us 3 months ago whether this would be a good thing, we would probably have responded with nervous laughter. But the result has allayed whatever anxiety we might have had about this, and speaking for myself, I am grateful for this time I have had with her. I'm also spending more time on the phone with my children. The uncertainty of the pandemic means I can't take for granted that no news is good news. We need to check on each other regularly. And as I've been listening to the video reflections posted on the Parish website each week, I've been struck by the fact that they are accessible as never before. The words we have spoken in this space are now available beyond the walls of the church, in a living form, at any time, and in any place with connectivity. This has opened up more possibilities for parishioners who are no longer able to travel. The distancing that prompted us to begin recording our reflections holds the potential for reducing the distance that many of us have lived with since long before the pandemic. I will close with a final suggestion. If you have a bit of time, there is a song written many years ago by Julia Gold, recorded most famously by Nancy Griffiths and Betty Midler. It is called From a Distance. Although it was written long before the present pandemic descended upon us, it speaks powerfully to our time, and I would urge you to give it a listen.